Imagine walking down Broadway in the mid-1800s. The air smells of coal smoke and horse sweat. The streets are alive, merchants shouting prices, fabric hanging from open windows, women in corsets bargaining in the cold wind. But in the middle of that chaos stands one building that doesn't fit. It's taller, brighter, cleaner, and inside it feels different. There are no pushy salesmen,
No shouting.
no haggling, just shelves, perfectly arranged with shimmering silk, French lace, perfume bottles that smell like Paris itself. The prices? Fixed, fair. And for the first time in American history, women walk in not to buy, but to experience. That was the vision and the revolution of one man, Alexander Turney Stewart. Before Macy's, before Marshall Field, before Walmart,
Amazon, or even the idea of shopping as we know it.
there was Stewart, a poor Irish immigrant who built the world's first department store. But here's the thing. You probably never heard of him. No schools teach his name.
No statues stand in his honor.
Yet he died one of the richest men in American history, and the man who invented modern retail itself. He was called the Merchant Prince of America. But behind his wealth was something darker, a story of obsession, betrayal, and the haunting loneliness of a man who gave birth to capitalism's most seductive addiction, shopping. He created a world where desire could be bought, where beauty had a price tag, and he built it from nothing, from an abandoned immigrant with a few pounds in his pocket to a man whose fortune rivaled Vanderbilt and Astor. And yet, after his death, even his body disappeared from its grave, stolen in the night. So how did one forgotten man create the empire of consumption and vanish from history itself? Was Alexander T. Stewart the genius who built the dream of abundance, or the man who accidentally unleashed America's addiction to want? Tell me, do you think the man who invented shopping should be remembered as a hero or a warning? Long before New York's carriages rolled across cobblestones, there was a boy walking the dirt roads of Lisbon Island, barefoot, quiet, observant. Alexander Turney Stewart. Born in 1803 to a linen trader's modest family. His father died when he was a child. His mother remarried, and young Alexander was sent away to live with his grandfather. He wasn't loud, he wasn't charming, but he was watching, always watching. He studied the way merchants spoke in markets, how their smiles shifted when money changed hands, how buyers' eyes lit up at the sight of color, how a single word could turn hesitation into purchase. He didn't know it yet, but he was learning human desire. When he turned 16, he did what so many dreamers did in the 1800s. He looked west, to America, a land whispered about in every Irish pub. A land where fortune was possible if you could just survive the journey. And so, with a small inheritance of about $500, Stewart crossed the Atlantic, alone, no family, no plan, just hunger. He landed in New York City, a muddy, chaotic place where opportunity and desperation were neighbors. He rented a room on Broadway, a street that would one day define his life. At first, he tried to become a schoolteacher. He had the patience, the intellect,
But not the passion.
Standing in front of a blackboard wasn't his destiny. He felt it. He didn't want to teach the world. He wanted to change it. One day, as he walked past the rows of dull little stores lining the street, he noticed something. Every shopkeeper shouted.
Every price was a battle.
Women avoided them unless they had to. The act of buying was ugly, transactional, exhausting, and Stewart thought,
What if it didn't have to be that way?
what if shopping could be something beautiful, almost magical? A place where women could walk freely, where prices were honest, where beauty, comfort, and respect replaced noise and chaos. That was his spark. With his small inheritance, he opened a modest dry goods store on Broadway in 1823. The sign read simply, A.T. Stewart & Co. No shouting.
No bargaining.
Just open doors and trust. At first, people laughed. A store where women browse, where prices don't move.
He'll be broke by winter. But the laughter faded fast.
Because something strange began happening. Women, who had long been ignored in the world of commerce, started coming back.
Again and again.
They brought friends, sisters, daughters, and Stewart realized he hadn't opened just a store. He'd opened the beginning of a new way to live, the birth of shopping, and deep inside, Stewart knew he'd found something worth building an empire on. But success, in those days, didn't come without enemies. And for Alexander T. Stewart, the higher he climbed, the more the old guard wanted him gone. Within a few short years, Alexander T. Stewart's little store on Broadway became the talk of the city. The Irish dry goods man had done something no one had seen before. He'd turned shopping into an experience. His secret wasn't luck. It was obsession. He studied everything. He watched what fabrics women touched first, which colors made their eyes pause, how long they lingered when the light hit a silk scarf just right. Every inch of his store was carefully designed to make people feel.
Not pressured, not manipulated, just safe and seen, and that changed everything. Because for the first time in history, women became the center of retail power.
In an era where they couldn't vote, couldn't own property, and rarely worked outside the home, Alexander T. Stewart gave them something priceless: choice. His business exploded. He expanded. By the 1840s, his profits were unimaginable, $500,000 a year. He opened the Marble Palace, the world's first department store. 6 floors of luxury, marble columns, skylights, chandeliers, and staff dressed like royalty. It was a temple to desire, and people came from across the nation just to walk through it. Inside, there were mirrors everywhere. For the first time, shoppers could see themselves, literally. And Stewart understood something deep about human nature. People don't just buy what they need. They buy what they want to become. He made that dream visible. He sold not just fabric, but the illusion of grace, sophistication, status, and the money flowed like a river. He built buying offices in Europe, importing the best goods before anyone else. He pioneered the concept of mail-order retail, shipping products to customers outside New York, decades before Sears ever did. Competitors tried to copy him. They failed. Politicians courted him. He ignored them. Even the city's elite, the old money Astors and Vanderbilts, had to admit the immigrant had outplayed them all. They called him the Merchant Prince, and they were right. But behind his silent eyes and measured smile was a man who slept little and trusted no one. He watched every number, every sale, every decision, because he knew one wrong move could bring it all down. He had built an empire of glass and mirrors, and deep down he feared it might shatter. Still, he couldn't stop. The more he earned, the more he wanted to perfect the system.
A system where emotion met economics, where people didn't just buy things.
They bought themselves. Alexander T. Stewart had turned consumption into culture, and soon his obsession with expansion would push him towards something far more ambitious, something that would test the limits of vision, greed, and faith itself. Because when a man builds the world's first retail empire, what does he build next? By the 1860s, Alexander T. Stewart wasn't just a merchant. He was a movement. His stores were no longer just places to buy. They were spectacles. The Marble Palace had made him a legend, but he wasn't satisfied. So he did it again, only bigger. He built the Iron Palace, a cathedral of commerce, stretching across an entire city block, its facade gleaming with cast-iron panels, its interiors glowing under skylights that drenched everything in sunlight. It was America's first true shopping mall, decades before the word existed. Rich or poor, everyone came. Servants walked beside heiresses,
Immigrants beside bankers' wives.
and for a few magical hours, they were all equal, united by the act of wanting. But the brilliance of Stewart's world came at a cost, because while he built for the public, he lived in private silence.
No children.
No social circle. No warmth outside his marble walls. He had his wife, Cornelia, a graceful woman who adored him but watched helplessly as his obsession consumed his every hour. He spoke rarely of love, but every day he spoke of control. Control over supply chains, prices, transport routes. He built factories. He owned ships. He created one of the first vertically integrated businesses in America, controlling everything from production to sale. He didn't just want success. He wanted perfection, and yet
He couldn't stop expanding.
after conquering shopping, he turned to real estate. He began building Garden City, a utopian town for his employees, a place where order, morality, and structure would rule. To him, chaos was the enemy. He'd seen too much of it. In the crowded markets of Ireland, in the unpredictable streets of New York. Now, he was building a world that could finally stay under his command, but outside his perfect stores and ideal towns, the country was burning. The Civil War tore America apart, and Stewart, ever the pragmatist, tried to profit while others fought. He supplied Union troops with fabric and clothing, earning millions as blood spilled on battlefields. Some called him an opportunist.
Others called him a genius. He didn't care what they called him, as long as the system held. But beneath his precision was fear.
Fear that his empire depended too much on him. Fear that no one, not his clerks, not his partners, not even his wife, could ever understand the delicate machinery he'd built. And maybe he was right. Because when you build a world that worships consumption, you have to feed it forever. Alexander T. Stewart had become the richest merchant in America, but his empire was starting to whisper to
Him, it was growing faster than even he could control, and
every great builder, sooner or later, faces the same truth. The thing you create, one day, begins to own you. Would you keep expanding if it meant losing everything human inside you? By the 1870s, Alexander T. Stewart was untouchable. His wealth rivaled that of Vanderbilt. His name, whispered, respected, sometimes feared, was carved into the bones of New York's streets. But what do you do when you've already built everything you ever dreamed of? For Stewart, the answer was simple. You gamble not on dice, not on cards, but on power. He began investing in land, thousands of acres across Long Island. And from the dirt, he dreamed of creating an entire city, Garden City, his personal utopia. A town built from moral clarity and economic order, where his workers could live cleanly, where families could walk in peace, where every home, every tree, every street would be part of his design. No chaos.
no corruption, no waste.
It was the businessman's dream, a perfect system. But beneath that vision was something else.
A whisper of immortality, because for all his brilliance, all his precision,
Stewart knew that even his empire couldn't save him from the one thing he couldn't control: time. Garden City wasn't just a project. It was his attempt to live forever, to leave behind something flawless. His name etched not on paper, but on a place. He poured millions into it, laid out wide boulevards, imported marble fountains, built schools, churches, gardens. Every detail had his touch: the symmetry, the the logic, the beauty, but the gamble wasn't just financial.
It was emotional. He was trying to build order.
In a world that only understood desire, and desire, he would learn, can't be controlled. His workers began to resist. Local farmers despised him. Politicians saw him as an outsider trying to rewrite the map. Even worse, the machine he'd created in retail began to strain. Competition grew. Prices shifted. Credit crises hit the economy hard, and behind his composed expression, Stewart started to realize he couldn't manage everything forever. Still, he pressed on obsessively. He expanded his shipping lines. He financed new warehouses. He planned to corner the market on international trade, everything or nothing. But then, in 1876, fate called. At age 73, Alexander T. Stewart, the man who never rested, fell ill. Doctors came. Ministers prayed. His wife, Cornelia, held his trembling hand as the empire he'd built hummed outside the window. And with his final breath, the man who invented shopping was gone. No farewell speech, no final letter, just silence. His death sent shockwaves through America. The richest merchant in the nation gone. The master of marble and money, but vanished into the history he had helped create. But this wasn't the end of his story. Not even close, because weeks later, when his widow visited his grave, the coffin was empty. Someone had stolen Alexander T. Stewart's body. And from that moment on, the empire of order he had built began to unravel. Would you risk everything, even your peace in death, or for a chance at immortality? When word spread that Alexander T. Stewart's body had been stolen,
New York gasped. It wasn't rumor.
It wasn't myth. It was real. Grave robbers had broken into his family mausoleum, pried open the casket, and taken the remains of the richest merchant in America. The man who built temples to commerce was now missing from his own grave. The city erupted. Newspapers screamed headlines. How could the great A.T. Stewart, and the man who clothed half of New York, vanish in death? Detectives searched every corner of the city. Suspects were questioned. But nothing. No ransom, no clues, no confession. Cornelia Stewart, his grieving widow, locked herself away in their mansion on Fifth Avenue. For months, she refused to speak to anyone but her attorney. She wasn't just mourning a husband, she was mourning control. The one thing Alexander had always promised, order, precision, power, had been ripped away by the chaos he had tried to keep out of his life. It was as if fate itself was mocking him. The man who could control the flow of goods across oceans couldn't control what happened to his own bones. The public whispered that it was karma, that a man who treated life as business had lost his dignity in death. But to those who had known him closely, clerks,
managers, workers, the theft felt almost symbolic. Because when Stewart died,
the spell of his empire broke. The Iron Palace began to fade. Competitors rose. His loyal executives fought over power. And the city he built, the system he perfected, continued without his name attached to it. The machine went on, but the man behind it was erased. Months later, a ransom note arrived, anonymous, demanding $20,000 for the return of his remains. Cornelia paid it, quietly, and one dark night the body was returned, in secret. No one ever confirmed it was truly him. No charges were filed. No one ever confessed. It was as if the merchant prince had slipped into myth, half man, half legend, swallowed by the empire he had created. But there's something haunting about that image. The richest man in America, his body taken by strangers for money, because it mirrored the world he'd built, a world where everything had a price. Stewart gave birth to the idea that desire could be monetized, that want itself could be sold.
And in the end,
even he became a product of his own creation. If you had built a system that turned human dreams into profit, would you still want to live forever inside it? Decades passed. The name Alexander Turney Stewart faded from the public's lips. But the world he imagined never went away. Every glittering shopping mall, every luxury store window, every sale sign that draws us in is a fragment of his vision. He invented the experience of shopping,
not the need,
but the emotion behind it. He realized something about people that few ever dared to see. We don't buy out of necessity. We buy to fill the silence inside us, to feel alive, to feel worthy, to feel seen, and that truth still powers the world today. Every scrolling feed,
every ad that whispers, "You deserve this," every dopamine rush when a package arrives.
It all traces back to one man, a poor boy from Ireland, who wanted to make buying beautiful, but there's a shadow side to beauty because the machine he built
never stopped.
It grew, it evolved, and now, 150 years later, it owns us. Stewart's empire collapsed soon after his death. His stores were sold off. His name erased from Broadway. But the idea survived. The department store became the mall. The mall became the chain. The chain became the algorithm. And though his grave sits quietly in Long Island, the pulse of his creation beats in every checkout line, every credit swipe, every moment someone buys not what they need, but what they crave. In his time, Stewart believed he was civilizing consumption, teaching the public elegance, order, fairness. But in reality, he was opening Pandora's box. He discovered how to monetize the most fragile part of the human soul. Want, and maybe that's why history buried him. Because how do you celebrate a man who gave the world both comfort and addiction? How do you honor someone who changed humanity's rhythm but also enslaved it to desire? The truth is, Alexander T. Stewart didn't just invent shopping. He invented the modern mind, the one that confuses ownership with happiness,
success with things,
self-worth with price tags. He taught us to chase what we can't stop wanting. And now, the question isn't how he vanished from history. The question is, can we ever escape what he created? If you walk down Broadway today, you'll find no trace of him. No statue, no monument, just glass towers and brand names, each one echoing his idea without his name. Alexander Turney Stewart, the man who invented shopping, died with everything. And somehow, with nothing, he built the first retail empire. He mastered psychology before the word existed. He turned buying into an emotion and desire into an industry, and yet within a generation he was forgotten. His fortune scattered, his mansion demolished, his body stolen and returned in secrecy, his name erased from the story of American business. It's almost poetic. Because Stewart's empire was built on illusion, the illusion of permanence, of satisfaction, of control. But illusions never last. He believed he was giving the public beauty.
And maybe he did.
He gave millions a sense of joy, of dignity, of wonder in the act of buying something new. But he also gave birth to the endless hunger we still carry today. A world where we chase things that never fill us, where happiness comes wrapped in a box and fades by the next season. Stewart's life whispers a question into the noise of modern life. If success is about control, about mastering every system,
every desire, Mahi, then why do even the richest among us still feel empty?
He built America's first shopping empire, and America built its identity around it. A nation of dreamers, spending, wanting, chasing, but the real lesson of Alexander T. Stewart isn't about retail.
It's about reality, because in the end, the man who controlled everything
couldn't control how history remembered him. And maybe that's the final truth of his story. You can master markets. You can own cities. You can shape culture itself. But if the world forgets your name, what did you really win? So tell me, if you could build an empire like Alexander T. Stewart, would you take the risk knowing it might one day erase you? Comment your answer. Was he a hero who gave us comfort? Or a ghost who taught us to never stop wanting? He didn't just sell goods. He sold the idea that happiness could be bought.